Hello and welcome. Tonight's story begins not with peace, but with impact. Metal tearing, alarms screaming, and a research station dying in orbit above a hostile world. A human doctor and a young alien cadet are thrown into a fight where survival comes before understanding, and every step forward costs something. Stay with us as they descend into a storm that could erase them both. Metal shrieked like a living thing as the station convulsed. Emergency lights strobed red across the corridor, each pulse revealing drifting shards of glass and a slow tumble of medical instruments in zero gravity. Doctor. Mara Voss opened her eyes to smoke and the copper taste of blood. Her ears rang, drowning the AI's clipped evacuation tone. Something warm slid past her temple. Not debris. Blood. A distant boom rolled through the hull, followed by the violent hiss of escaping air. Gravity flickered, slammed back, then vanished again. Somewhere down the passage, an alien cadet screamed, the sound cut short by another explosion. Mara forced her hands under her, breath ragged, vision swimming. The alarm wasn't stopping. The station was dying. A thundercrack split the corridor as the outer hull ruptured. The wall ahead peeled open like torn metal skin, and air roared past Mara in a violent white stream, dragging tools, panels, and loose bodies toward the void. Warning glyphs flashed across her visor as pressure plummeted. Two alien cadets clung to a rail, limbs trembling, their suits not rated for vacuum shock. Mara didn't think. She moved. She kicked off the floor, fingers scraping along the wall until she caught an emergency seal kit drifting by. Her shoulder flared with pain. Something torn, but her hands worked fast, slapping the patch over the breach. The material expanded, hardening as the airflow slowed to a hiss. The corridor fell into a ringing, fragile silence. The light steadied into a dim emergency glow, painting the corridor in dull red. Smoke drifted in lazy spirals as the station's AI finally cut through the ringing in Mara's ears. Structural integrity at 23%. Radiation shielding failure confirmed. Multiple compartments exposed to vacuum. Its voice was calm, almost gentle, which made the words worse. One of the cadets whispered a question Mara already knew the answer to. Orbital stabilization? A pause. Then, negative. Decay trajectory initiated. Estimated time to catastrophic breakup, 17 minutes. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Escape pods blinked red on Mara's wrist display. Disabled. Destroyed. Unreachable. Only one green icon pulsed far below, on the planet's surface. The shuttle. The shuttle icon glowed on Mara's wrist display like a distant heartbeat. Far below the storm-wrapped planet, around her. The alien cadets stared at their own readouts, their suit lights flickering with rising radiation levels. Surface conditions exceed survival thresholds, one said, voice shaking. Another pointed toward the shattered viewport where lightning crawled across the clouds below. Descent equals death. Mara wiped blood from her eye, leaving a dark smear across her visor. So does staying here, she said, already moving toward the lift shaft. A cadet grabbed her arm, feeling the tremor in her muscles. You're injured. Mara pulled free. Still breathing. That's enough. We go down. The shuttle tore free of the failing station like a scrap of metal flung into a storm. Alarms overlapped as atmosphere friction ignited the hull, turning the viewport into a sheet of fire. The craft bucked violently, gravity slamming back in crushing waves that drove the cadets to the floor. Mara gripped the crash webbing. teeth clenched as her vision tunneled. Outside. The planet's clouds churned in black spirals, lightning veins flashing through toxic vapor. A warning tone rose, stabilizers failing. The shuttle dropped harder. Spinning. Engines screaming against forces they weren't built to fight. Then came impact, a brutal, bone-rattling slam that snapped restraints and hurled silence through the cabin, broken only by the hiss of leaking systems. The hatch blew outward with a burst of dust and steam. Air from the shuttle spilled into a sky the color of rusted iron. Wind hit them like a living force, carrying grit that rattled against visors in sharp, endless taps. Mara stepped down first, boots sinking into soil that steamed where rain struck it. Her suit readouts flickered. Corrosive atmosphere. Radiation spikes. Unstable oxygen mix. One cadet stumbled out behind her and froze, staring at the horizon where lightning walked across jagged ridges. "We cannot survive here," he whispered. Mara drew a slow breath through the recycler, the air tasting metallic even through filters. "We don't have to live here," she said, already moving. "Just long enough." The storm never paused. It pressed against them from every direction. Mara moved first, boots sliding on wet stone as she angled toward a ridge that might shield them from the wind. Her left leg dragged a fraction behind the right. Suit pressure compensating for what felt like a deep bruise, or worse. The cadets followed in uneven steps, their breaths loud over the comm. Each gust shoved at their balance, grit stinging through filters, visibility collapsing to a few meters of gray haze. The ground shifted underfoot, plates of cracked rock tilting as if the planet itself breathed. Mara didn't slow. Her body corrected, adjusted, kept forward motion without conscious thought. Survival had direction, and she followed it. The wind dropped without warning. Sound vanished, replaced by a pressure Mara felt more than heard. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She shoved Leth sideways and ducked. Something slammed into the rock where they had stood, claws scraping sparks from stone. The creature unfolded from the dust like a nightmare of angles and muscle, its hide slick with rain, its head crowned with sensory spines twitching toward their heat signatures. A cadet screamed. Mara rolled, pain flaring white through her ribs, and fired her flare tool point blank. Light and heat burst across the predator's face. It recoiled, shrieking, limbs tearing gouges into the ground as it retreated into the storm. Only then did Mara realize she was shaking. The wind rose again, swallowing the creature's retreat. But Leth didn't move. He stared at Mara through his visor, replaying the last seconds in his mind. She hadn't turned, hadn't looked, hadn't processed a threat the way his people did. No analysis, no hesitation. Her body had simply acted, faster than thought. His training told him survival required assessment, calculation. Mara's survival had been reflex, an unseen system taking command. He noticed her hand now, trembling faintly, blood threading along her glove seam. She hadn't reacted to the injury, hadn't even looked at it. To Leth, it was terrifying clarity. Humans did not wait to understand danger. They survived first. Understanding came later, if they lived long enough. Mara stumbled once, just enough for Leth to see the dark smear spreading across her suit at the waist seal. "Your pressure integrity is compromised," he said, voice thin over comms. She didn't look down. "Still holding," she replied, though her breath came rougher now, each inhale catching. Her BIOS readout flickered on Leth's visor, elevated pulse, falling pressure. internal trauma flags stacking in silent warning. In his species. Pain shut movement down, forced rest, demanded care. Mara kept walking. Steps automatic, shoulders squared against the storm. When lightning flashed, Leth saw her jaw clenched, eyes unfocused, as if the signals screaming through her nerves never reached the place where decisions were made. The storm's howl faded behind the memory rising in Leth's mind. A lecture hall. Soft lights. Doctor. Mara Voss standing before rows of alien students. Humans don't feel everything in time, she had said, tapping a diagram of a nervous system that seemed more machine than flesh. Signals lag, awareness lags, but the body moves anyway. Leth had thought it fascinating then, an academic curiosity. Now, trudging behind her through acid rain and shifting ground, he saw the truth in motion. Mara's steps never matched her condition. Blood loss should have slowed her. Shock should have stopped her. Instead, her body carried her forward, blind to limits, obeying survival long after reason would have ordered collapse. Leth's fear shifted into something colder, sharper. He had admired human resilience as a marvel of biology, a topic for journals and simulations. Now he understood the cost written beneath it. Mara was not enduring pain the way his kind would. She was bypassing it. The warnings her body screamed never reached the place that could stop her. That meant survival. Yes, but it also meant damage accumulating in silence, systems failing without consent. She wasn't choosing to be brave. She simply hadn't received permission to quit. Watching her move through the storm, blood seeping unnoticed. Leth grasped the truth she had tried to teach them. A human could be both miracle and catastrophe at once. The storm thinned just enough for the shape to appear through the haze. A dark, angular silhouette, half buried in mud and ash. The shuttle, its hull was scorched, one wing twisted, but the fuselage remained intact. Leth felt a surge of relief so sharp, it almost hurt. Mara didn't react. She just changed direction. Boots splashing through acidic runoff as if pulled by a line only she could see. They reached the craft and circled it, lights scanning seams and fractures. The rear hatch hung open, swaying. Inside, the pilot lay slumped in the harness, visor cracked, motionless. Hope and loss settled together in the same breath. The machine could save them. The cost was already paid. Mara climbed into the shuttle without a word. Boots leaving wet prints on the deck. Panels flickered. Half the displays dead. Warning glyphs crawling across the rest. Power cell integrity at 40%, Leth read. Hands shaking as he accessed the console. The storm hammered the hull. Each impact, a dull boom through metal. Mara pried open the engine access hatch, sparks snapping against her gloves as she rerouted a burned conduit. Her movements were steady, almost mechanical, even as her biosigns dipped further into the red. Radiation alarms ticked upward. A slow, relentless count. "Time?" she asked. Leth checked the window. "Less than 10 minutes before the next surge." Mara nodded. "Then we don't stop." Mara tightened the last connector and sat back, breath fogging her visor. For a second, she didn't move. Leth saw it then, the tremor in her hands growing, the dark bloom spreading beneath her suit plates. A warning chimed from her medical overlay, quickly dismissed. She hadn't even looked at it. Blood pooled at her hip seal, slipping past the fabric in slow, weightless beads. "You must stop," Leth said. Stepping closer, Mara only shook her head, eyes fixed on the engine panel as if sheer will could keep it alive. The shuttle hummed weakly, systems crawling toward function. Outside, lightning cracked the sky. Inside, something in Mara's body was failing quietly, the price of every step finally coming due. The engine whine stuttered, dipped, then rose again in a strained, uneven pitch. Console lights flickered as if the shuttle itself were losing focus. Leth's display filled with cascading alerts, power fluctuation, coolant instability, radiation seep through damaged shielding. The storm outside slammed the hull, each strike rattling loose panels and sending dust from the ceiling in drifting clouds. Mara tried to stand, hand braced on the bulkhead, but her knees buckled halfway. She caught herself before falling, breath coming in shallow pulls. "Systems don't care how close we are," she muttered, fingers moving over the controls with stubborn precision. The power cell readout dipped another line. The margin between flight and failure was almost gone. Mara reached for the ignition panel again, but her hand missed the surface entirely. For a heartbeat, she remained upright, swaying, eyes unfocused behind the visor. Then her body simply shut down. She folded sideways, striking the deck with a dull, heavy sound that cut through the storm's roar. Leth rushed forward, catching her helmet before it hit the bulkhead. Her suit vitals scrolled in chaotic bursts: pressure loss, internal hemorrhage, neural shock. She had walked on injuries that should have stopped her hours ago. Now there was nothing left to carry her forward. Outside, lightning flared white across the viewport. Inside, the only human heartbeat in the shuttle faltered into a fragile, irregular rhythm. Leth knelt beside Mara, hands hovering uselessly over her suit seals. His training screamed procedures, protocols, sterile environments, none of which existed here. Her heart rate spiked, dropped, staggered again, a rhythm fighting without guidance. He replayed the hours behind them, the fall through fire, the march across poison rain, the predator's strike. She had been dying since the station tore apart, and never knew it. Her body had carried her forward on momentum alone, ignoring signals that should have stopped everything. Leth felt the weight of that truth settle like gravity. Humans survived by not knowing when to quit. Now that strength lay silent on the deck, and survival rested with him. The storm's roar pressed against the hull, but inside the shuttle there was only the thin, uneven sound of Mara's breathing. Leth stared at the controls, then at her motionless form, and felt something he had only studied in theory: fear without instruction. His species survived through calculation, through shared systems and layered safeguards. Alone, he felt incomplete. The manuals in his head offered no solution for a dying human on a broken shuttle under lethal radiation. His hands trembled over the console, claws tapping useless patterns. Every instinct told him to retreat, to seal himself in the safest compartment and wait. But waiting here meant death. Survival now required something his kind rarely practiced: acting without certainty. Leth forced his breathing to slow and pulled up Mara's medical data stream. Fragments of her lectures surfaced in his mind, pieces he had once filed away as academic theory. Autonomic override, heart rhythm independence, reflex pathways separate from conscious control. Humans could not command their bodies directly, but their systems responded to the right stimulus. He scanned the emergency kit, fingers brushing over neural pads meant for basic monitoring, never for invasive linkage. Her warning echoed: do not interface with a human nervous system. Yet the readings before him showed collapse already underway. If her body could run itself, perhaps he only needed to nudge the machine back into motion. if it did not destroy them both first. Leth stared at the neural pads in his hands, the thin filaments trembling with the motion of the shuttle. The interface was never meant for a mind like hers. Too compartmentalized, too opaque. Mara's warning rang clear, a line drawn in absolute terms. He looked at her again, at the slow drift of blood inside her suit, at the heart rhythm slipping further from stability. Outside. Lightning flared. The next radiation surge minutes away. Calculation said the risk of neural feedback was lethal. Survival said doing nothing was certain death. Leth pressed the pads against her neck and temple, hands shaking as the system tried to read pathways it did not understand. "Please," he whispered, and activated the link. The moment the link engaged, Leth's vision fractured. Signals slammed into him like a tidal wave, raw sensation without order. Heat, pressure, fragments of memory, flashes of motion. Mara's nervous system was not a network. It was a storm. He felt her heart stutter, muscles twitch in disconnected echoes. Warning glyphs screamed across his visor as feedback surged, his own neural buffers straining. He nearly tore the pads away, instinct recoiling from the overload. Then he sensed it, a buried rhythm, weak but persistent. He focused on that pulse, isolating it from the chaos, sending a stabilizing impulse through the interface. The shuttle lights flared as if in answer. Somewhere inside her, something fought to beat again. Leth locked on to the faint cardiac rhythm and pushed another controlled pulse through the link. Careful, measured, like nudging a drifting object back into orbit. The feedback burned along his nerves, but he held the signal steady. Mara's heart answered with a stronger contraction, then another, the irregular pattern tightening into something close to stable. At the same time, the shuttle console flickered as auxiliary systems registered renewed biometric input. Engine relays clicked, fuel lines primed, and a low vibration rolled through the deck. Leth gasped, barely aware of his own pain. He wasn't commanding her body. He was convincing it to keep doing what it already knew how to do: survive. Air dragged into Mara's lungs with a sharp, ragged sound that made Leth flinch. Her fingers twitched, then curled against the deck as if testing gravity. The neural link flooded him with returning signals. Confusion. Pain finally breaking through. The distant echo of memory snapping back into place. Her heart hammered now. Fast, but alive. Mara's eyes opened behind the visor, unfocused at first, then locking onto the ceiling lights as they steadied. "Engine status?" she rasped. Voice thin but real over the comm. Leth nearly sagged with relief. "Active," he managed. Outside. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the shuttle systems hummed louder, as if waking with her. The engines ignited with a violent surge that pressed them into their restraints. The shuttle lurched forward, skidding across mud and shattered stone before clawing upward through the storm. Lightning lashed the hull, each strike flashing white across the cockpit. Mara's hands locked onto the controls, movements sharp, automatic, guided by reflex more than thought. Warning tones layered over one another. Wind shear, thermal spike, structural stress, but she flew through them, adjusting pitch and thrust in instinctive bursts. Below, the planet's surface vanished into roiling cloud and dust. The storm tried to drag them back, to tear them apart, but the shuttle forced its way higher. Shaking, burning, alive only by momentum and will. The storm thickened around them, a wall of pressure and fire. The shuttle shuddered as another lightning strike crawled across the hull, systems screaming under the load. Mara's vision blurred at the edges, blood loss and radiation clawing at her focus. But her hands never hesitated. She rolled the craft sideways to slip between two rising columns of charged cloud, engines flaring at a dangerous angle. "Hull stress critical," the AI warned, voice almost lost in static. Mara didn't answer. She felt the motion rather than calculated it, riding the turbulence instead of fighting it. One more burst of thrust, one narrow gap ahead, and the sky above them thinned from black to gray, then to open dark. The clouds fell away beneath them in a sudden, dizzying drop, replaced by the silent curve of the planet below. The storm still raged across its surface, lightning flickering like distant veins of fire. But up here, there was only the hum of engines and the soft crackle of damaged systems cooling. Mara eased the shuttle into a stable ascent vector, hands finally slowing on the controls. Leth stared at the stars emerging ahead, sharp and steady, disbelief washing through him. They had left the deathworld behind. The hull bore scars, radiation alarms still blinked, and Mara's vitals trembled on the edge of collapse. But they were alive, suspended between disaster and the vast, quiet dark. The shuttle settled into a fragile orbit, engines lowering to a steady, exhausted hum. Weightlessness returned in a slow drift, tools and loose straps rising gently around the cabin. Through the viewport, the planet turned below them, a bruised sphere wrapped in storms that still flashed with distant lightning. From up here, it looked almost calm, its violence hidden beneath cloud and shadow. Inside, the air smelled of heated metal and spent circuits. Mara sagged back into the pilot's seat, hands finally loosening from the controls as if they had forgotten how to release. Leth secured the systems in silence, every motion careful, reverent. They had escaped the world, but not what it had taken from them. Leth activated the shuttle's recorder, the small red indicator reflecting in his visor. His voice trembled at first, then steadied as he spoke into the quiet cabin. He logged radiation levels, system failures, and the neural interface breach he had sworn never to attempt. But most of all, he described Mara, how she moved after the station fell, how she walked through poison rain with injuries she never sensed, how her body refused to stop even when collapse was certain. Human autonomic response confirmed beyond theoretical models, he said softly. The stars drifted past the viewport as he finished. Survival not dependent on awareness, survival driven by motion. He ended the record, hands still shaking. Mara drifted in the pilot's seat, harness loose, breath slow now that gravity no longer pressed against her failing body. Her eyes were closed, face pale beneath the visor light, but her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Leth secured a stabilizer line across her suit and watched the planet turn below, storms flashing like distant scars. Up here, there was only silence and the faint hum of life support holding them together. Mara had survived not through certainty or control, but through momentum, through a body that refused to understand defeat. The shuttle circled the deathworld in quiet orbit, carrying the proof of a truth the galaxy would struggle to accept. Sometimes survival comes before awareness. They escaped the storm, but not unchanged. This journey reminds us that survival is more than staying alive. It is the choice of who we become when fear and pain strip everything else away. If this story moved you, follow the channel and join us for more cinematic sci-fi tales where humanity is tested at the edge of the universe.